Good morning, Comrade. You are listening to WHIV-LP New Orleans 102.3. This is Good Morning, Comrade. We have a very special returning champion guest. It's been a while, actually, since we've had you on the show, Diana. I think we talked about baseball. I think we talked about wrestling one time, right?
I feel like it was still pandemic era, as in like we were like on Zoom because that was the only way we were communicating with people.
Yeah.
Like it was early, so it was a while ago.
Anyway, Diana Hussein, returning to the program. We have Diana Hussein. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. We can maybe talk offline about some intro, like walk up music you could play with that introduction you just gave me as the reigning champion here.
A returning champion, yeah. You need your own intro music, like a pro wrestler.
Yeah,
right?
we could talk about. I got to brainstorm what that would be, but we can figure that out.
If you were a pro wrestler, what would your entrance music be?
That's such a fun question, and it's so annoying because like it's literally one that I can't figure out what mine would be because I'm like, oh, it's just like too fun of a question. There's so many.
It's such a fun question.
I guess it would depend on what my gimmick was, I think. Yeah. So I would need to actually think about like what is my gimmick exactly? What music would make sense? I would so overthink that question because I'm that much of a nerd.
That's true. I will say, and look, we're both nerds for wrestling, just to sort of like get us a little bit launched off on some of the, the fun stuff on the show. But I will say that one of the funniest things that you and I talk about like regularly is Kevin Nash and just like the thumbnails that are on his little YouTube channel. Like you'll just
I love it. It is, first of all, I am so happy. Detroiter, absolutely. But like, let me just say, I am 2 for 2. I'm not even kidding. My 2 top all-time favorite pro wrestlers, as in I was like a teenage girl, 13, fangirling, having dozens of posters in my room and everything, rather than NSYNC and Backstreet Boys in this era. I had Kevin Nash and Bret Hart. Kevin Nash was the one I was in love with. Bret Hart, I was just like, he's my favorite. There was no like, I love him, I want to marry him. But those two ended up being pretty good people in this day and era in which they are not problematic. In fact, they're quite pretty good and like actively good. Kevin Nash, he's a little bit of a lib, but it's like endearing as hell because he's just like out there about it. He's an anti-Trump person. It's great. Like, think about it. Hulk Hogan, for example, like that's the other end of how pro wrestlers turn out these days.
My favorite thing, just not to get into it too much, but like I just love seeing him post on his Twitter. If you look at his Kevin Nash Twitter or whatever, he's just like complaining about like, oh man, the leg room on Southwest is just terrible.
poor big guy. What a sweet, what a sweetheart.
Anyway, we didn't have you on to talk about this, though. We could talk about this all night, I imagine. But we definitely
did. Kevin Nash.
Oh my gosh, and the thumbnails, just even more important.
Sexy. Thumbnails. Big Daddy Cool Diesel.
Big Daddy, that's right. But no, I want to talk to you just about a number of things. Just because one, we need to catch up, and then two, I mean, you're a Detroiter yourself. We're in the middle of a Solidarity summer right now. And
Solidarity September.
Yeah, Solidarity summer, Solidarity September, Solidarity season. I've been hearing going around. And I mean, you're a Detroiter, and like the big 3 auto workers, the UAW are on strike right now. Not that goes along with what's been going on with the Screen Actors and the writers. And like there's just so much union activity happening right now, and I just wanted to talk to you about it. So I don't know, just sort of like off the top, like first off, I mean, how is it feeling like right now, just knowing that something is happening and all this is going on?
It's pretty exciting. I just have one more to add on. I think we can just say solidarity era. So
Okay.
solidarity, we are in our solidarity era right now, is what's happening.
Solidarity.
Where it is true that there's a lot of workers on strike, but I would say like the thing that's really like key here is like it's a lot of like prominent public facing unions that people recognize on strike in industries that people are very familiar with and are huge economic engines in the US these days, in which others tend to be outsourced like this over the years. Like, well, obviously UAW jobs have clearly been outsourced over the years, but I'm just saying, like, when it comes to like these unions in particular, they're digestible for the greater public. And I think that's like key in this. And I think that's really great because it's giving other unions, smaller shops, smaller properties, smaller organizing drives, momentum themselves. So I just want to like, sorry, I'm sorry, I can see Jeff on the screen and he has his finger up. I'm like, jump right in, comrade.
No, not just that. Like, these are jobs that are extremely identifiable with like a lot of regular people's image of what an American like worker is, right? Like, oh, when you think of an American worker, like, you know, obviously it's a lot more complicated than this, but like for a person on CNN or whatever that's talking about the American worker, like somebody who works at a factory putting together cars in Detroit is like that's the sort of like the 1950s version of what you would think about when you would say something like that. And so like it fits into, I mean, obviously it's more complicated. I mean, like workers everywhere, all over the place, like need rights and need good pay and good benefits and all the other things. But this is something that's very easy to say, like, look at these workers. They want something. They have been getting screwed over for the past 40 years. And, you know, it's time to give them what's theirs. And the CEOs are just the best villains for this case as well.
Oh yeah, they're so good at it. They're so good at being natural villains. And I will just say, just to add on to that point, like I think like even as much as like the UAW auto workers are always kind of like the stereotypical like image of what a union member is, but like, you know, actors aren't necessarily that. And so it's just like the visibility of these kind of like roles and their impact on people's lives, I think is just like really cool to see. And I think the real key thing here, and I think it was Fran Dresser who kind of like touched on it in that big speech she gave at the start of their strike. And it is like this is happening across all sorts of industries where there is like increasingly more income inequality. It's just more rich at the top and less rich at the bottom. And it's just more and more and more. And doesn't matter if you're a CEO of an entertainment company or the CEO of an auto industry, you're making so much more money than anyone has ever made in history. And yet people are struggling to get by, that are the ones that are creating this opportunity and wealth that you're enjoying right now. Like, it sounds so simple, right? It's so simple, us versus them. But it's true. And it's not us that is creating that dynamic. It's them by continuing to demand more and more, whether it's more money for their profits and pockets or more workloads and more on the workers to, you know, give them more of that wealth.
Yeah. I mean, it's gone so far. It's gotten so clear that you have like CNN reporters talking to like what was it, GM
Mary Barra, yes.
Yeah, the girl boss that's over there, and like saying like, how can you defend the fact that you make like $30 billion a year or whatever, while workers have not gotten a raise since the
she said it. She's like, I think she was like straight up was like, well, yeah, my money, my income is tied directly to like the success of the company. And it's like two things that I hear when she says that. She's acknowledging, one, workers do good, she does good, so thank you, workers. And two, same thing can be said for the workers. When the company does better, they should do better. And so the company is doing better and it's entirely off their backs. And so it's just like very telling. Igor out there saying things like, this is unreasonable. Well, he's making so much money. I think it was Stellantis who was like in Aruba when he's saying that like the UAW members are asking for too much. Like, it's just like incredible. They're self-awareness. They're disconnect from reality.
you're at your vacation getaway in Aruba or whatever, and you're like, oh man, these workers, what do they want from us? Come on. Excuse me, I'm gonna go back and hit the waves.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like, as like, hotel bosses are on their yachts on the 4th of July weekend, like the hotel workers were on strike in LA, like demanding like the ability to live somewhat near where they're working their asses off in those hotels in like a very highly tourist market in like LA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And again, that's happening. That's something that's happening in many places.
Yes, it's like a very like there's so many stories and anecdotes of these people just being so ghoulish like that. It's remarkable. And I will say, like, the thing that's really changing every day is that people, they're no longer like willing to tolerate it. I definitely can say the pandemic ripped open the Band-Aid, or took down the fourth wall in a way where, like, oh yeah, well, it turns out our bosses suck, our government sucks, so what do we have right now? That brings us to this moment right now, because people are realizing more and more what they have is each other, and that's through the union.
Yeah, that is the one place, and I say this often on the show, like it's the unions are the one working class institution out of like churches that working class people have.
There's a lot of parallels for sure.
And that's sort of like the one place where we can kind of come together, and we can, like, I don't know, see the commonality amongst one another, not just in our own
parallels in a good way, I should say. Like, I said that in a way because I'm like pointing out like it's the good things about like religious like community that I see parallels of in unions. And honestly, like, I will say that the thing is, like, the stuff that attracts like Trump supporters, like, it is like a religion to them. Like, you go to these rallies and there's like a spirituality to it. It's positive, it's loving in their own little world of whatever bullshit love they have.
They have community.
But it's still like it's the religion. It's like the replacement of like an increasingly less religious world to like, what do we need? And like, that's why unions should be there for people. That's natural for people to want community.
Yeah. That is 100% correct, because like there is this sort of idea that at least like while the world, everything is against, specifically like when you mentioned the Trump supporters and the Trump people or whatever, like they're united in this sort of like the world is against them, and so they see themselves as the only like the last resort. And yeah, no, and again, like this is something that's like, unions specifically are something that is not fear-based. This is something that is commonality-based. This is something that is a commonality because we all work for a living. We all get paid less than we deserve, and we get the benefits that we don't deserve, that are less than we deserve for a living. So like, that's, I don't know. It's solidarity. Yeah. So so you're from Detroit, and as we're talking about these sorts of things, it's really interesting, at least to me, to get the perspective, because the auto industry is like very identifiable with Detroit specifically as a city. What is it like to see? I mean, I do remember the GM workers went on strike in like 2019. This is significantly different than that, because this is all three workers from all three major auto manufacturers that are on strike right now. And I guess I wanted to hear your perspective as a Detroiter on like what it's like to see this happening for the first time ever, really.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Like, we're talking about this kind of moment we're in where people are recognizing that there's like an unfair thing happening in this power dynamic at the workplace, and being willing to stand up against that. I think it's just really cool that like Detroit is kind of seeing a moment in all this, because Detroit, of course, has a lot of roots to the labor movement and its history in the US. And I think there's kind of cool, because I think it's really important for this moment to be a lot of calling back to the history of this movement.
Yeah, I've heard Walter Reuther's name more in the past week than I've heard in my entire life.
Listen, I don't hate that, right? Like, I started working, I do communications for a labor union. Shout out Unite Here, hospitality workers. I've been doing this 8 years. In a month, in October, it'll be 8 years. And when I first started, like, it was really hard to try to engage general reporters on labor stories. Like, you had like a very small group of labor reporters at that time, because it was when there was none. And so, like, shout out to the OG crews still out there killing it, like Hamilton, Nolan, folks like that. But I just think since then it's been just a lot more easy to have conversations with reporters about like why like a worker's perspective or a labor story is key to like their beat, whether it's labor or not. And so like it's just been really interesting seeing that change. And I think like having it kind of come back to Detroit in this moment is just really, really exciting. I grew up in the shadow with the big three. Specifically, I grew up in Dearborn. That is the birthplace of the automobile. That is where Henry Ford is from. And like, not even going to go on a like side rabbit hole about Henry Ford yet. Like right now, like that's not going to happen because I can. But you know, it's just really, really powerful to see the UAW take this on in this way, because, you know, like even growing up in Dearborn, that all being said, like I wasn't really taught labor as a thing that's ongoing. It was history and that's it. It was something in the past. It was great. They had sit down strikes. They did stuff. They won stuff for us today. And thank you. They can go rest easy now, labor movement. And it's like, no, there's organizing that will forever be needing to happen. We will never have to stop organizing. And so I just think like that is very interesting, like the kind of education I got growing up in Dearborn and how it really did kind of instill this like stereotype of what a union member was. And I never related to that. But I ended up finding my way into this particular union that is particularly like progressive and, you know, engages in like social justice-y stuff, whatever you want to refer to it. And I like that about this union, but I think it's just like really powerful to see that, you know, right now, like we are seeing the UAW, we are seeing actors, we are seeing writers, we're seeing hotel workers, potentially soon casino workers in Las Vegas. September 26th, 50,000 workers in the Las Vegas Strip are voting on whether or not they're going to go out on strike. And I just gotta like say that that's gonna have ramifications in other parts of the country. For example, Detroit's casinos contracts are also just expiring. So I imagine whatever happens in Vegas is not going to stay in Vegas. I cannot believe that was the natural trajectory of that sentence. That was unintentional until like the last two words where I was like, I might as well go with it and finish this
just
off.
Vibe through it. Just vibe through it. Are you saying that? Are you saying that that Las Vegas Strip workers are going to go on strike on my birthday, the 27th?
Oh, I'm saying that they're going to vote on whether or not they're going to authorize a strike at any point. I'm not saying they're going to go on strike, Jeff.
Gotcha. I gotcha. I see what you're saying.
No, I'm saying like the strike authorization vote is very, very powerful because it's like a symbolic message of unity. And I can tell you something. I'd be willing to guess that the percentage of workers who are going to vote yes for that is going to match the percentage of workers in the right to work state of Nevada that are members of the culinary that pay union dues.
Yeah. So it'll be
guess what that is.
Yeah, 100%.
I'll tell you, 98%. That's my guess.
That's I hope so. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. And that is really exciting to see that again, you know, we have people standing up everywhere. I mean, there's a massive contract campaign happening all up the East Coast in property services, janitors and things like that. People really aren't talking about this in the mainstream media right now, but there's multiple contracts that are going up in like over this fall, and there's various sort of things around that are taking place as well.
See, this is something I think is very underrated in telling this story about the labor movement right now. Like this moment we're having, right? We're talking about large scale strikes because that's the only kind of coverage that editors are going to improve reporters to go cover. And so like they got to be like some big like narrative setting, like trend defining story for reporters to get the sign off from their editors to cover it. So what we're missing is that like so-called incremental organizing moments, those new contracts, not first contracts, not just winning the union, we're getting our first contract fights even.
I mean, that's exciting too, but it's a different deal.
Third, fourth legacy contract renewal in this moment where workers are having leverage and power in the bargaining table. Like, we're winning major gains, and like that's not gonna make the news because that's like there's no one is like contract victory. Hell, look at the grievances workers are winning these days because they're actually like more engaging with their unions that have existed there for a while, and like their reps are like winning. Like HR doesn't want to mess with a union rep these days. Like, it's paying off. Like, the momentum isn't just going to translate to like union density grows massively overnight. There's reasons that's not happening. There's just union busting tactics favor like the companies over blah, 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 labor law sucks. We know that's the reason. But like, that's what they point to as like, well, you're seeing the headlines and strikes, but like union membership's not growing. What's happening is like the solidarity and union, like just that union movement is just growing stronger.
And I think that once we sort of, and again, we're coming off of a generation of like a concentrated generation of like concerted government union busting that started prior to Reagan, but really kind of hit its like stride.
Yeah, Reagan really defines it, and it's kind of funny because in a lot of ways you see the charts, and it's like whoop, right at Reagan too.
And the union membership sort of took a dive by then, and it's been taking a dive ever since. But and that came, in no small part because of the busting of the PATCO, air traffic controller strike, amongst other things. Which, man, don't get me started.
The hardest thing to overcome in organizing is people's fear, like their natural fear, and that like really defined when the president made a move like that. Like, you can imagine how like, whoa, I don't want to mess with someone who can do that to my workplace. And if I was trying to unionize, like, that's real. And I could see like that being part of the culture shift because like people's opinions on union membership also declined. And I think it was a lot of like the propaganda of like the companies and people in power, like being really, really deliberate about it, making it be like, ultimately like, if you unionizing, you're basically choosing to like make us fire you kind of stuff. And Reagan really, really like defined that for moments. But I think what's happening is like working people are calling bullshit, like that they're like calling bullshit and going for it because they have nothing else to lose. Things are really, really dire. And it's just like people are really, really starting to understand their own power.
Yeah. And so we mentioned a bad example of a United States president who and their impact on labor law. And I wanted to kind of talk to you about the sort of the current sort of deal that we're dealing with, which is, again, when Joe Biden ran for president in 2020, he said he was going to be the most pro-union president in the history of this country. And I mean, first off, let me just say that is a very, very, very low bar.
And then really, especially in recent history, for sure, that bar is not that high. Which is why I will say, like, I think in that way, he's succeeding for sure. I think Biden is certainly far more pro-union than the last few decades of Democrats. Like, so I think it's very interesting, right? Like that bar being so low, that moment, like I said, being so dire for so many people, like, is it enough where the bar's low and you cross and that's great. We should be happy and grateful. But no, like, how are we taking advantage of this moment where we have this so-called pro-union administration? All right, like, what can we do to work together to figure out that relationship?
How can we rally under this sort of under this cover? And it's more than just like a pat on the head. Unions are good, Sonny boy.
It is. It's like, how are you using the executive power that you have to do things? It's very funny. I think there's like, folks recognize this like a theory about Joe Biden. Like, he's probably like, having a lot of handlers run a lot of decisions and like public facing comments. But I believe in my heart that if there's one thing that Joe Biden is genuine about, it's his love for labor unions. in a way that's kind of like a callback to like a era of Democrats that comes like pre-Obama, pre-Clinton, and like back to a actual age where Democrats were Labor Democrats. And so it's kind of like this like circle of life thing, maybe. I don't know. Like he's so old that he's like a callback to an old era.
He remembers the time. Him and Corn Pop remember the time before.
Well, and I think he just genuinely likes the like good old boys club vibe of like being in front of a union hall. He like riffs with members. Like he did that at the AFL-CIO and affiliate endorsement rally in Philly. Like he was vibing with people. Like those clips weren't as like public as like his kind of riffing with the Republicans at the State of the Union, but like there were kind of really funny moments. He's got like back and forth with people calling out in the crowd. Like I just think Biden loves that vibe, and like he's like, oh yeah, I love the union guys, the hard hats, they're, you know, and just like vibing with them. And then you get like spokespeople on the record being like, you know, we just hope both sides come to a good agreement that's a win for all. And it's like, yeah, and then he's going to Chris Smalls saying, got me in trouble, we're coming after you, Amazon. Like, I just think we got to let Joe Biden be Joe Biden, because I think his off the cuff just love for labor could really translate into some crazy ass executive order.
Well, and we've also seen something, and we talked about this with our friend David on the show about the CEMEX decision that happened within the NLRB, which made organizing a union or union busting more penalizing, and it is something that there is policy behind just the talk as well. There's more to it than just the talk.
I think I would actually say it's more appointments than policy, because it's policy where I get a little stuck. And I'll just be real. I think there's like movement in the right direction. I think like this like blitz the administration went on right before Labor Day to do all this like pro-union activity was like a sign that like they're trying to take advantage of the Labor Day media cycle and be out there on like worker rights, because like they know they want to win next year, and this is what you got to do. It's good. It's a good sign, and I think that it's promising. I do think there's an onus a little on the labor movement and unions to figure out how to work this relationship. I think there's a lot of institutional hurdles of DC that we need to figure out as an organizing project how to get over. I'm talking about like the schmoozing, the relationships that are required in DC to like, you know, have something with a staffer that's going to prioritize to their boss your thing. Like, I think it's organizing. And I think that like unions have to kind of like recognize that in this moment before anything changes in it, because you do have people like Pete Buttigieg is going to listen to labor unions. I think so. I think I've seen it in a lot of ways at the DOT. And I think that there's been a lot of progress and like things that fall under his thing when it comes to like unions figuring out how to work with that relationship. I mean, obviously, like the NLRB General Counsel, Jennifer Abruzzo, is a really, really great appointment in that role. But like, it goes back to day one of Biden's administration, where his first act was to fire Trump's general counsel. I forgot his name. So I just think that like there are kind of signs. We just have to figure out how to work it. Like, what is the executive order we want to say Biden should do? Because like we can't just say PRO Act. Biden can't do the PRO Act.
We tried that too. And
it's not Biden's fault that we don't have a PRO Act in a direct way.
He supported the PRO Act, and the thing is,
I mean, he loves saying PRO Act. He loves saying PRO Act. Yeah,
he would still say it if we reminded him, I'm sure. But no. I mean, unfortunately, you got Congress that you got to deal with, and unfortunately, yeah, the Democrats generally just are not good at winning those kinds of fights. They'll just rather
they're not good at. They're just like unions. They're not good at bragging about themselves, because it's like a good union doesn't have it in its nature to be like out there being like, good job, we just did an organizing victory, the public should know. Like, we're not good at that. We're like, well, we don't want Right to Work Foundation to like get ahead of us now. Like, we can't celebrate this like new union before we get a contract. Like, but I think there's a lot of things that are fair, and we have to be strategic about it. But I do think that like in the same way, Democrats, there are things like this is like very Unite Here niche. so I apologize for this one. But the Commerce Department, Gina Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce, went to China and like engaged their representatives on opening group travel back to the US. It has not happened since COVID. This is actually like a big impact on like Unite Here members, because in the cities we have the highest density are going to be cities like San Francisco and Honolulu and LA, like markets that have a lot of Chinese group travel. And so it's actually going to impact the economy there in like billions kind of way. Is going to impact jobs. We've had a lot of struggle winning back jobs because these companies have really cut jobs even as they're getting better. It's going to impact our members who rely on tips and like people coming back to the cities. And it's like, they're not really out there about this. It's like, you got something that like the industry and unions are on your side. You did something good job. Like, what are you saying about it? And I just think like, you know, we're trying to work with them and figure that out, but like we as a union have to push them. So I just think that there are opportunities in this pro-union administration.
We got to post our
but then we get into the UAW stuff. We like the whole UAW thing makes it so much more complicated, actually.
Well, we'll talk about that on the other side. You listen to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3, WHIV 102.3 FM.org/listen. Listen to Good Morning Comrade. We have Jeff and Diana Hussein, who is a union staffer, and she is joining me on the show to talk about just sort of the upcoming resurgence of labor that's happening in this country and sort of ways that we can move it forward and some of the things that are holding us back potentially. I do think it's interesting, the sort of like, you know, you just mentioned we need to start posting our dubs a little bit harder, and you mentioned a little
That's
bit.
Right, you summed it up much more efficiently. Unions need to post their dubs more.
Yeah, we got to post the dubs, but also like you mentioned, the complicating factors that are happening with UAW. Can you get into what you mean by that a little bit?
Well, I was referencing specifically like in terms of like Joe Biden being pro-union, and is that real? Like, because obviously it gets complicated because
a lot of people would say that, oh wow, he busted a rail strike that of last year or something like that. We talked about this a lot on the show, and like I don't exactly agree with the way the administration kind of advanced that sort of thing, but. I mean, again, in the context of America, like Joe Biden is still better than most American presidents on the issue of unions.
Yeah, right? For sure. I think that is probably one of the biggest like black X's on the administration's labor record, for sure. I think it's a really hard argument to work around. I think it is one of those things when I'm thinking specifically like Unite Here members who are engaged in and how they engage in politics. I think to some degree it is like a little niche of a story, and I think it's important to be like, you want to educate people and like making their decisions, and like it's definitely something we have to figure out how to have an organizing conversation about if we're trying to get union members to vote for Joe Biden so Donald Trump doesn't win. I just think it's something that like what can you even say about that, right? And does it put like a period and we can no longer have a conversation on the Biden administration and its ability to be pro-union?
You can't do that.
I don't think so, because I think we still need to be like, okay, but like we still have to make sure that they don't do shit like that when they have a chance to step up for unions. And it's like, we have agency in this. We can't just be like, we're waiting for them by the nature of their goodwill. We can't wait on that. Like that's what I'm saying. And I think like union members are the people who got these people elected, whether it's by voting for them or by organizing voters and knocking doors for them. It is very important that we like flex and have them accountable throughout, because like they can't win without us. And so I just think that like it is in our power to have agency with this relationship.
And it's important that they know that they owe that to us. That they know that they don't get elected without us. But unfortunately, right now, the way that things seem to work is that the Democrats are like, well, I guess, you have to vote for us. We can't do anything. And they sort of take us for granted. If you know what I mean. For
sure. And I would say I even see a positive trend in like how Biden's been trying to navigate that, because like they're out there owning Bidenomics, which I think is a little cheesy. Except from them. There's something about it coming from them. I don't think we shouldn't be out there like Bidenomics. No union should be like hashtag Bidenomics. No toolkit to ever say Bidenomics. But them kind of like tongue-in-cheek owning it and then being like, here are whatever the 3 pillars of Bidenomics, and one of them being like being pro-union and increasing unionization. Like I think that's like they're trying to do something with that. And I just think like it's the Democrats on the rest of the ticket, like the folks we need to hold the Senate and win back the House, that need to just like overall figure that out and like take the leadership. And you see it play out when you look at who's gone to the UAW strike, right? I don't think that's an accident. I think that anyone that's going to the UAW strike, especially if it's not in their district, Ro Khanna, you want to run for president one day, and you need the current face of the party to see you out there doing that.
It is shocking to me that Hakeem Jeffries showed up to a picket line wearing a 1917 t-shirt.
Listen, I'm shocked that Hakeem Jeffries went out there and endorsed Ilhan. He's out there endorsing Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
AIPAC's going to try challenging that. So I wonder what's going to happen next? Like, AIPAC doesn't play. Like, I don't know. We don't have to go into that.
Oh, okay, or not. But it is something that is a little bit interesting. So
Nancy Pelosi, hell, Mr. Strike Breaker himself, Barack Obama, is out there saying these companies make too much money. I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier, that recognition that like they are making so much money, we can't even comprehend this number of billions. And like we're struggling to pay rent. Like, why is my housing going up? And they're just richer and richer and going to space. Like, I can't afford food. I just got my credit card declined. Like, I had to borrow money from a coworker. Like, what is this? And so I just think that it's gotten so like internalized by the masses, and like, I don't want to say mainstream, but it is 75% of America is sympathetic with auto workers on strike over the auto companies. Whew. That is
75% of people. You can't get 75% of people to agree that they like ice cream.
No, you know what I mean? I think the closest I've seen is Big Pharma, and not even that much of a divide. Like, it's incredible. And it's because it doesn't matter the party. That's the thing that Democrats can't concede, is that unions are above, just like abortion. It's above partisan lines. Like, it's not something that should be politicized, because it's like real, like impacting our livelihoods and our existence.
Yeah. And and sort of I don't know. You mentioned that there's this momentum, and there's this sort of wave and resurgence of at least the popularity of the labor movement that's not necessarily been converted into like more membership, but how can we sort of convert that at least into a atmosphere where we can continue that snowball effect, to continue that sort of growth of the, not just the political strength of the unions and the popularity of unions, but also the most important thing, which would be the membership of unions. How do we sort of make that conversion? Which is, I think it's, I guess if either of us had the answer to that question,
I know, right? No, I got it. It's 1 + 1 = 2. So no, it's very nuanced. You got to do a lot. There's a lot that has to happen, but I think it really comes down to like the fact that what we're seeing happening is just the start, in my opinion. Some people think like we really got to latch on and we blah, blah, blah. But if you think about it, like real, true, successful organizing takes time, and like hot chops are great, and we want to capitalize on the momentum and keep that going, but we can't rely on it to be how we grow our numbers. Like, you're going to win, you're going to lose too. And I think we need to also go in understanding that like the risk of losing should never be what sets us back. Shout out Chris Smalls for organizing what they was filing like 30%. Like, that is bold. And I think that kind of like thinking and mentality and feeling and trust in your kind of committee.
One of the most like amazing things I've ever seen happen is whatever. I mean, there's a lot of people that say a lot of stuff about Smalls, but that is one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen happen.
It's a story. It's really cool. It was really cool to watch that vote count. Like, it's stupid. We watched it on Zoom like it was a sporting event, but
yeah,
I think it's
crazy because
important.
it was crazy because they had 2 votes that day. They had the RW vote and they had the St. Allen vote.
And I think it's unfortunate because I think the RW vote was in its own way historic. It just happened to happen that same day and feel like a loss compared to a win. But to have that close of a difference happen after that first vote, and then to get that much closer in Alabama is also significant. And I think that, like, I don't think there's like a right or wrong when it comes to like independent unions coming in more and more these days, or like legacy unions. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think what works for the workforce is what's important. And so I think you really want to like just rein in and support it all.
Yeah, we're all on the same side here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all on the same side here. I mean, that's all.
I think it's very exciting. Yeah, I forgot. I was like going on a train of thought when I went off the rabbit hole of like, remember when Chris Smalls and folks, like, we shout out to the whole committee there that really like organized their coworkers in the right way to win that. Like, I know one of my coworkers' son, Cassio, was one of them. I want to give Cassio a shout out. So
shout out to Cassio. So you mentioned again the momentum.
One thing that I really want to like go more into is this question of momentum right now, because I think that what we're seeing is like the big sexy strike headlines and like the new industry unions in big ways. But I think what is happening too across the labor movement is like the underground organizing that we're not going to know about for even a few more years. I think the numbers are going to come over time and not overnight. We're going to see like a burst. And I think it's going to play out. And the more we can like engage in this real public facing ways and support the UAW to where it's forcing Congress people and like celebrities to engage and be supportive publicly, because it is like the public favorable thing to do, and by 75% of America sympathizing with auto workers on strike, I think it's going to play out over the course of years. And I think that's what's cool about it, because like people who are just coming out of their first union and organizing their, say, coffee shop in a few years are going to be people who are going to organize and train and lead and recruit and just have more and more of it across the board.
When they do like their coffee shop, they become
organizers is not what we have. We have not enough experienced organizers out in the world. That's why we're not growing it enough.
We need more veterans. We need more veteran organizers.
We need more experience, like people who've been through it for a minute,
Yeah, totally. And again, like this momentum could also, we mentioned RWDSU in Alabama not long ago. This is something that also can potentially break into, and I know that there's been a lot of sort of consideration for investment in organizing in the South by a lot of these unions.
I love talking about organizing in the South.
Yeah, I mean, like even though that RWDSU and the Amazon facility in Bessemer was ultimately a defeat, they definitely sent organizers down, and they definitely built up something that was one, not expected, and then two, like something that could potentially branch off into other things. And I don't know, what in terms of like what sort of like the future of organizing in the South looks like. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have two things I want to share. One real quick. It's cool. Unite Here sent organizers from like other parts that we represent in the South, including like Georgia, to Bessemer in solidarity with DSU. I think it was about 25 folks who then went on to lead their own canvas teams to help win Georgia Senate seats. So I think that's like one interesting, cool way that like the experience of solidarity in the labor movement gave people more, they did like house visits and stuff in Bessemer that in a sense they were doing door knocking in the same way in Georgia to like win for Warnock. So I think that's really cool. But two, I think this one you're going to be much more interested in talking about is I really like the example of like what's possible in organizing in the South when I think about New Orleans and its hospitality industry, because in terms of like really high density tourist markets in the US, like I would say New Orleans is probably among the lowest hospitality industry density right now.
Oh, yeah.
However, I think that's going to change a lot in the next coming years just because of what I'm seeing. And one cool example is that in the last year, workers that do the concessions and serve fans at the stadium and arena in New Orleans unionized and won their first super amazing contract that like saw like the standard of these jobs like raised so high now. And so what's possible for other workers in the area is like now higher. And it's really cool. Like I can't get into all of it because like I said, underground organizing is happening, but I will say like New Orleans is the city to keep an eye on, its hospitality industry. And Hamilton Nolan wrote a really good article on it. That's worth checking out.
Can I just tell you really quickly, so our mutual friend April, we went to a Pelicans game last December, and when we went to the concession stand, it was just like seeing the people at the concession stand with their Unite Here pins. It was just like, yeah! It's just so cool.
I love when my members are buttoned up in the world, and I'm like, yes.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know, it's just the coolest thing. Just like seeing it, and you just like point it out, and you're just like, yeah, union, we love the union. It's just great.
It's so beautiful. I'm obsessed like the culture of union buttons like that, because like it's so cool, and like members like from different locals like exchange buttons. I had a research director like swing by my office today and like drop off like a whole handful of like old school Unite Here, actually HERE buttons that I'm going to put on my button corkboard in my office. Like I love that shit. It's like really kind of like a cool thing to hold on to about the labor movement. Mm-hmm. So when I see members like buttoned up, like in DC, I see it all the time, and I'll learn that like this like property at a hotel or whatever is not necessarily going through a fight. They're not like being organized to button up. They're just like super proud union members who like to show that off every day at their jobs. And I'm like, they love their absolute like right to wear their union button proudly.
Oh my God, I love that. People that wear a union, like I don't know, I was one of those people in all the school teach. I would be wearing my blue JFT t-shirt all the time or whatever. You know, that's even right. Like in my new job, I've gotten so many purple shirts over the past 9 months that I just don't know what to do with them all.
Union drip is legit cool. Yeah! Like it's wild. Like you could go to all those like resell like online stores, and like that's getting more expensive. I keep a search alert for Unite Here on eBay, so anytime somebody posts something that is Unite Here on it, I get an email, and so I just kind of monitor like who's selling some of our shit. It's very funny. But can I tell you what I see repeatedly that is like the most in stock on eBay that's getting resold by people more than any other Unite Here swag?
What is it?
It's so funny, Jeff. You're gonna laugh. It's Unite Here for Obama t-shirts.
That's incredible.
Let me tell you, that is a ridiculous item to own if you think about how things unfolded with Obama and the labor movement and unions, specifically Unite Here, who is really invested in union healthcare, and Obama and the Cadillac tax. It's just like really funny and kind of its unique relic, and it's Obama, Unite Here for Obama. It's like shirts and buttons all the time on eBay.
I was having this conversation with somebody recently, and it's just become one of these kinds of things. And I don't know if you don't want to talk about that, that's okay. But like, there's just so many people in the sort of Democratic left and also in the union left that have, despite everything, like positive feelings towards Obama. And it's just like,
who?
How do you? Oh, I don't know. I just talk to him all the time. Like, I'm not going to name names, but I mean, and I just.
I'm like talking like I thought it's like a pretty widely acknowledged thing, but it might be maybe I'm in a bubble. Shit.
But but I mean, again, the reality is that like again, he didn't deliver. I mean, EFCA was DOA, you know what I mean?
And like literally, we could even go into things that he's done since then, like
talking the
essentially
NBA.
like break the NBA strike. Yeah. Like there was a moment, do you know what would have happened if the NBA players actually like went somewhere with that strike? Like that's like the SAG strike where it's like people that people know, and like of all the pro sports leagues, like the NBA I think in particular would have had a real like powerful impact, like more than any of, like in that moment, in the bubble, in the height of the pre-vaccine pandemic, there was something there coming off the George Floyd uprisings, like and then Obama put that flame out like that. Like, are you kidding me, man? Come on, man.
He did that with the NBA strike, and then he did that with Bernie. So like he's still got so much clout. It's so, I don't want to get started on Obama.
I mean, he did that with the DNC chair race between Tom Perez and Keith Ellison. He was calling the floor of that DNC day of voting, like whipping votes and within the hours of them voting. It was just like he puts his thumb on the scale when he wants to.
He's got so much clout that just sort of like
he only uses it when it's about like maintaining like this like existing bubble of his world of power, and like that's it, like his like place in it. Like he never was somebody that got anywhere and got to where he was because he was like still that like community grassroots organizer who like loved Marx in college. Like he decided he wanted to like play by the rules and figure out how they were to his advantage, like off the whatever expense of actual movement building.
And he got really good, and this is why Obama was so good, was because he got really good at speaking about, like he was talking about it but never being about it, and that was him to a
100%. He defined that, and I think that's where, going back to Biden, people can be frustrated about and feel like we need more. But if you side by side, Biden is 10,000 more pro-union and effectual in that way than effectual. Is that a word? Effective. Jeez, it's late. Effective.
No,
about union stuff.
Morning.
I don't even know what time. I don't know what time it is. My days are a blur these days. It's because the labor movement is so on fire right now that like we don't get sleep. Union staffers don't get enough sleep. Workers are too mobilized these days.
Yeah. Anyway, and this sort of like last little bit, that sort of we can sort of like wind it down a little bit, but there is
just getting started. This is fun.
Oh, let's go. Let's do a double episode. But no, in terms of I don't know, when it comes to the sort of like next. Like, so we see UAW, we see
shout out to the Teamsters who didn't have to strike.
Let's talk about that for a minute. So the Teamsters, I mean, obviously there were our favorite people over like that like love to make a bunch of noise on twitter.com or whatever about like, why the union leadership or whatever sold out to for this contract or whatever. But I mean, they got huge concessions, and they got, a much better situation. Obviously, neither of us are spokespeople for Teamsters, but I mean, the idea that like going on strike necessarily is a victory, like getting the contract is a victory, right?
And if it takes going on strike, it's still a victory. I don't think it's less of a victory if you do or don't have to go on strike. I think it feels more emotional of a victory if you've gone out on strike because of just how hard that is. And like, I don't want to take any power away from the people who go out on strike because they have to. But I think there is also like, the whole point shouldn't be to go on strike. Like you ultimately like that you have to go in knowing that is your tool you have in your toolbox. But like not having to use it, that's great, And so you really want to have all the momentum in your favor up until and like as if you're going out on strike. And that's what the Teamsters did. Mm-hmm. And in terms of concessions, like here's the thing, like I feel like concessions and like your demands that you're public about, depending on like how big or small it is, like you have to like think about it, because I feel like there is part strategy to go super, super bold. And like, I think it might be with like the UAW and the 32-hour work week in particular. I think I think it's a conversation to really go bold about specific work schedules when you want to you want to try to win this. And so you want to start the conversation by saying, like, we're talking about how many hours of work, because workers in the auto industry are getting like overtime enforced and overworking. So I think they're trying to go like, well, no, we're not doing that. In fact, we're going here. Because I do think there's like a negotiation that happens. So I think like you wouldn't go up and ask your boss for a raise and be like the exact amount that you would win for. And so like I think there is also, you can have a debate on whether or not you agree with that strategy, and that's absolutely fair. But I don't think I want to say that like they lost in any way per se.
No, the membership agreed to it. That's a victory.
That's
I do think
what's important.
So you mentioned the 32-hour work week point, which I think went just by the nature of asking that. So the two of the major demands that the UAW are rolling out are a 40% pay increase, which would essentially put them back on schedule for what they gave up in previous contracts when the government essentially had to bail out the auto industry, and the workers are the ones that took a bath, and the CEOs thanks Obama.
They took private jets to their meetings and then had to drive to Florida from Detroit, and the funniest display ever. It was so funny.
Yeah. But this is going maximalist on what your pay demand is, and also opening up another general question that the entire rest of the working class can actually sink their hooks into, which is the 40-hour work week, which is I think it's too much. I don't know. And it also like rolls it back and it makes work a less of a dominant, like overwhelming part of your life. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for sure. Like, I think ultimately we want to be going in that right direction. I don't think culturally we're there. I don't think that people are willing to give that up in like terms of their power to concede that, like, yeah, we can win less work per week. It's so installed in our heads, like 40-hour, 8-hour, blah blah blah. But I do think like that is, yeah. So I think it's strategy to go bold, and then, but I think that the wage thing, I feel like they could win, and like the work week thing, I don't think is 32 hours going to be the victory. Like, that's just like my theory on things, because I feel like right now the thing is like wages are possible. I've seen it with the hospitality contracts. We're winning insane gains. Like we have just like those Compass food service workers in DC just won something that was like the most wage gains they've ever won in a like term of a contract, like ever, like just like by like some combined number times 2 or something like that. It's like incredible, like for like dishwashers and housekeepers and like what's possible. And like, you know, it's really cool. Like going back to talking about like organizing the South, like the way the UAW is inspiring in a real way to show what's real and what's possible if you're willing to go bold and not be like that fourth wall is up and we can only ask for this much and have to be grateful for it. I got a call, my phone, because I think my I shouldn't say this, but I got a call. And it's like, so sometimes I get like kind of calls, like when people are trying to contact Unite here, they somehow come across me. And so it was a voicemail. I'll send it to you, Jeff. Like, I'll share it with you because it was like, I won't do that, but I'll describe it because I was like riding the bus listening to this on my AirPods, like trying not to tear up, because it was this man. He sounded a little older. He described like 25 years in the hospitality industry. He's worked in New York City. He's worked across the country. He's worked in union properties, and he's very pro-union. And he talked about solidarity. And he said, like, you know, I just feeling really just inspired. I'm watching the solidarity UAW strikes. And he's like, you know, I saw you all were doing solidarity with UAW too. And I think that was really cool. So I looked you up. I'm in Arlington, Texas. So I found you guys. I'm in Texas. I can do things in DFW and I can do things in Austin. I really want to figure out how to get involved. Like I want to just talk, whether it's like working with whatever you have going on or figuring out like where to organize, or like he's just like offering like the real substance that you would want to like talk through when someone's like, I want to organize, but like you have to ask questions, right, to see how like real and like, you know, and you know, just really like get into it and like find out like what's possible and what they're really interested in doing. This person was like all the right cues, like everything, boom, 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 and it was so cute because he had a real thick Texas accent talking about solidarity, talking about working in this hospitality industry. And, you know, I just thought UAW strikes. I saw you all we're out there with them. And, you know, this is really cool. And like, it's just so sweet. And this like older Southern man talking about organizing. I think that's something like that doesn't just like happen overnight. Like that's like a result of like what's going on in this moment.
I'm picturing like Bobby Hill like going and like saying, I'm gonna become a member of the union, and like Hank Hill being like, oh no, not my son.
I actually just remembered because I passed it along to local 23, who represents the Texas chapter of our union, and I wanted to make sure we had like somebody who was able to reach out to him before I like called him back and said anything. And I got the okay to say like, hey, someone's going to be reaching out, but I got to put it in my to-do list to remember to do it tomorrow.
Right. Well, this is live action breaking news happening.
Yeah, no, it's very sweet though. Like, who knows? Maybe Unite Here is going to start having a presence in Arlington, Texas.
I love it. Well, Diana Hussein, thank you so much for chatting with me on the show. You are always welcome to come on and just talk about the labor movement, pro wrestling, baseball. What else do we?
For sure. No, this is fun. I appreciate you letting me just come on and like talk about let's talk about what's fun in labor these days. And I definitely feel like we barely even hit the surface of things. Yeah, there's so much we could dig into, and I would love to come back and chat through with you more of what's happening with unions these days.
You sure are right. There is a lot.
Oh my God. Can I just describe what I'm seeing right now on the screen? Jeff's cat Flick is going crazy for attention. He is getting all the pets and he is not letting go. Oh my God. He is petting himself on Jeff's mic, on Jeff's face. He is so happy right now.
He headbutts you if you don't pet him.
Oh my God. That's so much like my cat, Calvin. Shout out Calvin in Michigan, my orange boy. You're a good cat. I love you, baby. Cowboy.
Cowboy.
Shout out Calvin.
Well, thanks, Diana. And you can listen to Good Morning. Is there anything you want to shout out? You can follow her on Twitter at HeyDiana. Is there anything else you want to shout out?
I not at the moment. Just keep organizing, keep supporting workers, go unions.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's always great talking to you.
Now I'm looking into your cat's butt.
Sorry.
He's very proud.
He's very proud. He's not backing down from that either.
That was the close-up. He put it right in front of the camera.
You can listen to Good Morning Comrade every Saturday at 10 a.m. in New Orleans, WHIV FM 102.3. You can listen to anywhere in the world, whivfm.org/listen. Get more information about the show, whivfm.com. Thanks so much. We love you. Bye-bye.
Good morning, comrades.